So there's two very big topics. I think we can start right off the bat. What's happening with the stock and then FSD in China. Let's start off with the big ones. The stock has fallen. It's now around the $300 mark. It fell $27 today, about 8%. Start with you, Randy. What's your thinking about why the stock fell, or just in general? Why did this happen the same day that FSD is approved in China?
Oh, so you want to complicate the question, huh? So, well, the question is, I guess, broader than that. Why has it been falling with all of the good news that we've had for basically at least for the last 5, 6 days? We've had just one piece of good news after another, and yet the stock continues to fall. I'm gonna maybe surprise people. I think it mostly has to do with the fact that it just was way out over its skis at 488. That the real price to me is around 400. That's probably where it should be right now. So now it has reacted to being way out there, and as Tesla commonly does, it sells off way past where it should, and now it's stuck down in this area where it will bounce and come back up over the next few weeks, depending on macro, the economy, specific things catalysts that might happen between now and, you know, my thinking is that we will not really know a lot until the end of April. We got so much up in the air between now and the end of April, in terms of the number of cars the number of Ys that are going to sell, in terms of whether we're going to see any Optimus videos, in terms of whether whether Grok is going to end up on our entertainment center. So many really cool things could happen between now and the end of April, and that's probably when we'll really be able to get a gauge as to how the company is doing and how the stock is doing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Now, I think most of us would agree that this Q1 number shortfall is something that most analysts, most investors are already anticipating. Maybe they're not anticipating to be as deep of a shortfall as it might become, but they've already anticipated. When I just do a quick look online, and again, this is news, right? Who knows what they know? They're kind of saying European EV registrations in Europe is one reason why it's tumbling. Of course, Elon and what's happening with Doge, that's another reason. Some people mention, because Elon said something about FSD in China is using simulation data. That just came like really late today. I don't think that's part of it. And what you're thinking about that?
Okay, so there's no question in my mind that the politics are going to have a short-term impact. I don't think they have very much long-term. We've had all kinds of weird things like Pedo Man. For those of us who've been around, we know that there can be things in the air that are going to cause a few people to say, I'm not going to invest in Tesla anymore. I'm not going to buy a Tesla. Or potentially, I had a friend of mine 18 months ago who's a West Side Los Angeles liberal who said, I'm going to sell my Tesla. He didn't, but he said he was going to. So, this is not the first time that we've had some of the, I would call them, some people call them antics. So far, except for with a couple of exceptions, the things that Elon do almost always turn out to be really, really good. And that Twitter would be certainly a prime example of where we had the Twitter overhang, and then we had the horrors of the way that Twitter was handled when Elon took it over. And then we had the dramatic drop in the overall value of Twitter, and the fears that he would have to come back and sell more Tesla stock in order to save the company. And now, all of a sudden the company is now back to 44 billion value. It's adding all kinds of great stuff, and will probably eventually be worth 2, 3, 4, who knows, 10 times what he paid for it.
Thanks, Randy. So we got Michael Hale here as well. Simon is skiing, right? Michael, they're brothers, and as you guys have gotten to know Simon, he's a portfolio manager at Wellington Altus, and so is Michael. Michael, what's your perspective of the portfolio managers? What are the institutional analysts? What are they thinking?
Well, first, thank you for having me on today, Herbert. That's right, Simon's skiing today, so I'm going to have to do my best to fill in his place.
Yeah.
So, it just in the markets, we're seeing. I guess Tesla looks pretty oversold today. There's a lot of larger themes that are playing out at the same time that are putting extra force on it. So it's like you have many things converging at the same time. And so in today, like we're seeing a big risk off trade, which means all growth companies selling off. The 10-year yield was down 10 basis points today, so 0.1%, which is a fairly large move. And you're seeing risk assets like Bitcoin sell off. And so regardless of the fundamentals on Tesla, it's going to come down in a larger degree with that. And then on top of that, we no longer have, because now a lot of the cash flow is future cash flow through autonomy and robotics. You don't have that backstop of revenue, a revenue multiple or an earnings multiple that can sort of set a base to the stock. So it allows it to be a bit more oversold than normal as well. So one of those is just a risk off trade. There's some other things too. I mean, obviously this morning, the sort of European sales story, which seems a little overdone to me. People are quoting 47% deliveries decline. You know, it was an easy target for the media to hit this morning. The real question is, what are the sales numbers, not the deliveries? Because you know, if you're ramping up production and you may have had some year-end deals heading in December, it's really not that surprising that deliveries are low for January. It may not really be a reflective what the demand is, and I don't think that was shown. So there may be some over shooting on that side. And then on top of you know all of that, yeah, we also had Monday was this you know deadline for public employees to say what they did this week, right? And so I mean, often what happens is when you have a big seller in the market, it can accelerate things even quicker. So I am questioning whether there's any public pensions that are dumping Tesla shares that could accelerate the algos into selling as well, which is why we see this very sharp move down. So I think there's a convergence of forces pushing the stock down, and it looks very oversold here.
Got it. That's great to hear. Michael, did you get any phone calls in the yesterday and today from your portfolio families who invested through you guys and saying, I got to sell Tesla today?
I didn't get any selling emails. I did get some emails questioning whether we're concerned about you have to remember too, we're in Canada, so in Canada there's that extra pressure with the tariff threats that people are sort of trying to put the weight of the Canadian economy on Elon's back.
Yeah.
So we've got that extra force here, so people are concerned about that. So I did have some emails on the topic. Nobody asking me to sell today, but there were some questions on it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that's great. Sat, did you have a question?
Oh no, I just want to add on to it.
Yeah.
Like the report, like 47% down. The actual number is 8,216 units. That's less in the month of January. So it's really overblown, and they do this every time. That's why Elon has strictly, where it's legally possible, not divulge like regional sales, like how many units were sold or taken delivery in each region, because if it goes down 1 month, 1 quarter, and the articles will write this kind of like article that defames Tesla. Basically, it's going down the hill when, in fact, all the automakers are going down. And so they over exaggerate it. Even the units is not that big of a difference, considering that you have a ramp up. If you have a ramp up and it's after Christmas, people aren't going to buy. And Q1 is historically known as the quarter that doesn't do well in terms of sales for auto. So it doesn't make a lot of sense why they have all these articles every time and then people react to it. And then second, they're like, this typical criticism that Elon always gets when the stock goes down is he's doing too many things. He can't do Doge while he's running two companies and X. Well, when he was buying Twitter, they said the same thing. He can't run Twitter because he's running two companies. And they said the same thing when Tesla was going down and he only has SpaceX and Tesla, that he's spending too much time at SpaceX. So this criticism always comes up every single time, or a news article comes up at the time when Tesla's doing bad or it's going down. It's the same repetition I've seen over the last decade.
Do you guys think it's going to continue falling? This morning, Gali posted that he felt that he had to sell 10% of his stock. And now he has a different scenario situation. He had to do it because he's expecting to pay cash or bills and rent for the next 6 months per year. But he just feels that it's going to he feels that it's going to go down before it goes back up again. Any thoughts on how low it might go?
I mean, Tesla has gone down like 60% from all-time highs on a semi-regular basis over the years, over a span of 2, 3 years. So it's not like, unreasonable to expect that. But at the same time, I sold up while we're going up above 400. So I sold a small chunk of my highest cost basis, like everything above like 290, 300. I was selling it while we were going up. So I'm reserving some cash on the way back down. So if people need to sell, they need to sell now. But I wouldn't be surprised if it went down. But I also don't expect it to go down every single day. That's the other thing too.
Yeah, one comment on that as well. I mean, there is some resistance at 300. We're sort of hitting the 200-day moving average, and so we'll see some resistance. Could it go below here? It's possible, but there is significant resistance at this level.
Also take into consideration that in the last if you go 6 months exactly back to August, which was kind of when Elon got super involved in the political thing, we're up 43%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but okay. And so, Larry, I haven't heard you from yet. Omar, any thoughts on the stock before we move to the next topic?
Well, I don't much watch the day-to-day stock. Surprised that it's gone down to 300, which I kind of heard today. It could go lower. It doesn't. It's meaningless. I mean, the market in general is down. The macro situation is looking tough. The political situation is very uncertain. This uncertainty does not do well for stocks. The uncertainty is going to prevail for a while until, this administration is readjusting America's place in the world, and it's readjusting the world. The same thing is happening in Europe. The same thing is happening in China. It's going to be some months, if not years, before the new world order emerges, but it is going to be a different world order. I think it's going to be very good for stocks in general and for the economy in general, but I think it's going to be a rough passage to get there. I think Tesla will participate in that passage. So if you're a short-term investor and you watch the day-to-day, there are people on this call that are much more qualified to call that than I am, so I wouldn't opine on it. But in general, I remain very bullish on the stock. I'm seeing, I'm seeing an opportunity coming where I could accumulate because I'm still a buyer of the stock. So that's my position.
Thanks, Larry. Okay, let's move to the other big news was China FSD version 13.2.6 on hardware 4 cars are rolling out. People are now receiving it. That we're now seeing videos of people in China using this version. It is considered not called FSD. It's called Navigate on Autopilot, NOA Autopilot. And then just a few hours ago, Elon confirmed, he said, we just use publicly available video on the internet of roads and signs in China and use that to train in sim. And one of the first bloggers that was explaining his experience, very positive, saying that it's working really, really well. Omar, we have you here. Lots of questions on this. So let's get started with what do you know has happened? And you can take it wherever you want to go. But I do have a few questions to ask you too.
Yeah, this is an incredibly exciting day in Tesla's history, and it's a day that I've been waiting for a very long time. FSD is now on 2 continents. This is one of the most material events of the year. And you remember that roadmap that the Tesla AI team published 6 months ago? They've now delivered virtually every bullet point on that list on schedule. The one item remaining is Europe, which they're really just waiting for regulatory approval. From a technical level, they're there. So China is Tesla's biggest market. There's about a little over 2 million cars in the United States, and the best estimates I can find are about 2.2 million cars in China as well. So we're talking about a US sized market for FSD, and this is a very tech forward market. FSD is now the best ADAS system available in China. And it's not like the Huawei system and some of the other systems only available on the high end cars. It's available on all the cars Tesla makes. So they're getting started. It's going to continue to get better from here. It was really interesting. You know, a lot of people didn't expect this because of their comments on the earnings call. We can't export the compute. We can't export the data from China. So what are we supposed to do? And a lot of people were worried about this. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that they have trained an AI that knows how to drive because it understands physics. Yes, you need to know some things about the local driving rules, the street signs, all of that stuff. But the core of driving is don't hit anything, stay in the lane lines, make a turn, avoid this. They carry over globally. So the same model, it works in the US, it works in Europe, it works in many parts of Asia, and it's trained using data from all over the world. It's not just trained based on data from the US and Canada and Mexico. It's trained from Tesla's global fleet of 7 million cars. So, yes, they don't have data in China, but places like Vietnam, Japan, Cambodia, Mongolia, where there are cars, there are many places that have some of the same kind of driving situations, some of the same kind of cars. And they were able to use their simulator. The simulator is not just the video game simulator, but these generative AI approaches that allow them to generate with the text prompt, training data and variations of the training data. These techniques have allowed them to create data that look just like Chinese roads. Think about like Grok generating an image, right? You train all the data, and you can essentially get these generative AI models to generate images that look just like China and are realistic. Now, a lot of people who are bearish on FSD said, well, if they can train just on simulated data, doesn't that mean their whole mode is gone and now everybody's going to copy them? Well, what they're missing is you need the actual base model. Think about it like a driver who's trained to drive in the United States. If he wants to go to China and get a driver's license in China, he probably only needs a little bit of brushing up on what some of the road signs and road rules and bus lanes are, but that the fundamentals of driving he already knows, and those will carry over. So that should really be the takeaway here, that they've trained a model with this US version that is now going to start scaling across the world. Just in terms of this quarter, we've seen Mexico, Puerto Rico, and now China added. And this is the most competitive EV market in the world. Tesla already does extremely well there. The new Model Y is now going to be launching with FSD. This is a great differentiator in the world's most competitive auto market. It's something that is much more difficult to copy than, for example, the exterior design of the car. And I think it's going to make a material difference in China. I expect them to start unveiling FSD subscription soon, and this paves the way for eventually doing robotaxi in the country as well, although I would expect that to follow the United States. So super exciting. People who are in China seem to love it. They say it's smoother, more confident, and more lifelike than other ADAS systems. And I don't think this is the last country they're going to add this year. I think they're going to hopefully get into some European countries or maybe Australia and New Zealand before the end of the year as well.
Omar, so they called it NOA or autopilot, but it is 2024.45.32.12. It is version 13. Is it a Is it a different version? Are they allowed to do everything that FSD is allowed to do? Are you aware of the slight change differences?
There's no difference from the US version. It's the same FSD 13.2 that we're running in the United States. A lot of people were confused about the name, which I think translates to intelligent assisted driving or something like that. This is just based on the view of Chinese regulators that a supervised self-driving system should not be called self-driving. So they're using a Chinese term that they think is appropriate. Once it's fully driverless in the country, then maybe they're going to use a different term. But people who are saying, oh, it's just autopilot, it's just navigate on autopilot, it's very clear when you look at the videos, this is
Yeah.
hands-free FSD 13.
Yeah, I saw that too. I mean, and then just a comment, can you, on like, like they took the same software and then they dropped it into China and it's working. And right, without the local data, that is just shows you how powerful the tool is and that it can go anywhere. I mean, they already did it in Mexico, now they did it in China. And so far it's looking like it's working really, really well. I mean, of course
Yeah,
it's going to
notice
make
how fast
mistakes.
they're adding new countries.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here's the thing. They've done demos in Germany last year to European regulators. They've trained a model here. What the end-to-end approach has allowed them to do, they can train on data from all over the world, and what comes out is a model that can actually drive all around the world. So look at Waymo, for example. They said, we're going on a road trip this year. We're going on a road trip to San Diego to figure out how we perform there. San Diego's 2 hours south of LA. How different is it? And they're going to Japan. They said, we're going to start with human drivers and see what's going on, and then maybe launch a service there. I think maybe they're also looking at the Netherlands. But the pace of these rollouts is very slow. There's a lot of work they have to do. Meanwhile, FSD is adding entire country support, and it's very simple to do because all they need to do is just make sure that it's obeying some of the local road rules, maybe add a few training examples. But the model can pretty much work out of the box anywhere. I mean, you could make a man-made island in the middle of the ocean, paint some roads and lane lines, and FSD would be able to run there.
All right. So Omar, you just said, and I want to ask the panel what they think, right? Your opinion is that you needed the millions of miles, you needed a supercomputer to create the base driver, and then from there, now you're able to use simulation to adapt it to a country. Does the rest of the panels believe the same thing? Can competitors just use simulation? Can NVIDIA now take all the data they have from all the cars partners they have, and then try to simulate this? Can the Chinese companies do this? Tessiota, you have your hands up?
Yeah, I think what happened here today what was profound. To answer your question, I believe this might shock people, but I think this was Tesla's own DeepSeek moment. What they have done is they were faced with a constraint that they couldn't do FSD, train FSD the same way that they could in the US. And so whatever they did, they likely did some variation of distilling the capability from the US model, then applied with some of those street level video footage that they were able to get from the internet from China, and then merge the two techniques together to make this work. Similar to DeepSeek, they were able to do this quote unquote in a cheaper way because they were able to stand on the shoulder of what was already developed in US with FSD. And now they can replicate this, I believe, in various countries, again using the foundational models that they built with the US North American markets, and then taking the rules, the video footage of country XYZ, and then start to iterate from there. This is quite profound. My question really for Omar is: are you getting a ticket to Shanghai to actually try this? And
Yes.
because let me tell you, With all your experience of that, you know, all the nuances of driving this in the U.S., I believe you're one of the persons on planet Earth that can give us a real assessment of the baby China FSD.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, that might have to happen, and I'd love to try some of the other Chinese systems as well firsthand.
Exactly.
But yeah, Nvidia doesn't collect any driving data from their partners. Their partners don't even collect most of the driving data themselves because their cars don't even have an internet connection. So, the market in general is completely in the dark at how far ahead Tesla is on self-driving. We're moving into an autonomous world. Look at what's happening with AI. This technology is about to be everywhere, and Tesla has positioned themselves to dominate it. You look at, for example, the software, a pure vision self-driving model. When they launch their service in Austin, it's going to be the first time you've ever seen a pure vision self-driving system. And what I'm seeing in my experience is it's smoother, more comfortable, and starting to have the same performance as Waymo. They both get there with zero interventions, but FSD does it with less false braking, fewer uncomfortable moments. It's just leapfrogging it and is going to continue to as this approach scales. So this is going to be really interesting when you see them side to side. Tesla's actually created a technology that is better, it drives better, but it costs less and it can be incorporated across their lineup. Then you look at Cybercab, which Omid just announced today. They're already starting preparations and hiring for the production of Cybercab, which is going to be in volume production next year. You look at what they're doing, for example, with the way the body panels are constructed. There's no paint shop. The unbox process, manufacturing in a much more modular way. And you realize that even if they had a model that was as good as FSD, how are they going to compete with this thing on price? How are they going to deliver the vertical integration where there's a charging network where it can go and autonomously charge itself? The vertical integration between the models they're training, the inference chips they're building into the cars, innovating on the manufacturing of the car itself to get down to a $25,000 price point, and running a rideshare network themselves. There's people trying to compete with pieces of this, but nobody else trying to do it all together. It's really exciting. I mean, so we're talking about the stock a little bit at the beginning, and I think that Gene Munster had a tweet that he just put out. He said, "I believe the recent pullback is largely related to investors recalibrating their delivery expectations for 2025. The catalyst to the adjusted expectations has been Musk's increased political visibility, alienating buyers." And then he said, "The dynamic is starting to show up with registrations in Europe, with European sales down 45% year over year in January." But, I question this narrative a little bit. The European decline in deliveries, which first off was reported a few weeks ago. So why this is a news story today again, I'm not sure. It feels a little bit fuddy. But there's obviously a product transitioning happening with the new Model Y. Deliveries are about to start of the new version. Until we get into March or so, I think it's kind of difficult to gauge how much of this is sales tanking because everybody hates Elon, which is the narrative, and how much of this is just related to the product changeover. Are you trying to make the argument that with new Model Y, the sales are going to fall further? I have a hard time believing that. They're talking about new, more affordable vehicles starting production this year, and the comp for last year is only 380,000 vehicles. If they can beat that, they're on good track for growth this year. But I think the core of what's really happening with the stock, beyond all just sort of the political negativity, is the idea that their guidance for growth might be missed, that they might sort of shrink 4% year over year, and that miss could be kind of shocking for the stock. My thoughts are that, even if they have a pretty bad number, let's say 300 to 350,000, I think Troy in one of the last updates I saw was at about 350,000. Does it really matter in the grand scheme of things when they're launching unsupervised FSD? I mean, these are the best products they've ever shipped. Um, I have a hard time believing that they're not going to be able to recover with new Model S and X, new Y, cheaper version of the Cybertruck, more affordable vehicles, and FSD rolling out to new countries. It feels to me like people have gotten maybe a little too bearish and let their emotions get the best of them here.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's the conversation I'm having every single day. Michael, I mean.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I mean, what we're seeing is hugely positive fundamental business developments. I mean, this FSD in China. China is the largest market on the planet by a long shot. It's just hugely positive news. And then you have the stock come down like it did today, and what appears to be, a bit of a narrative that doesn't seem like it's going to play out. All you're going to see is a massive rubber banding in the stock. So this thing's going to rocket once people work out that, wait, sales numbers aren't down 45. That was just a monthly thing. So I mean, we're going to end up in the same place in 6 months. I think what we're seeing here is just overdone, and it's going to rubber band right back up. Anytime there's a disconnect between the fundamentals and what's going on in the market, eventually it works itself out, because on the it's largely say on the short term the market's a voting machine, on the longer term a weighing machine, and eventually Tesla will be weighed on its merit.
So you guys, you don't think that this political climate is permanent? The brand damage by Elon is permanent?
There is an element of reality to it, obviously. He is extremely politically visible. Some people have strong feelings about him. But the idea that it's going to destroy Tesla when they've got their best products ever coming out, I think it's been vastly overplayed as a narrative compared to some of the other things that are going on. And, you talk about the China news, for example. 1 week ago, they were telling us that China was not going to give FSD approval because they were using it as a bargaining chip. So these are the kinds of narratives, completely false narratives, that are being pushed by people who just want to tear down the stock. And we know a lot of these guys. They're shorting the thing. They're putting out FUD stories. They're saying, oh, now China's not going to approve it, when the reality was the complete opposite. So you can kind of do that for a while. You can scare people, you can short it, you get guys like Galley who go, oh shoot, I better sell now before it goes down even further. And you can create this sort of moment of fear, but eventually you have to cover that position, and probably in an environment where they're announcing new vehicles starting unsupervised FSD and showing top and bottom line growth. I do think there really is a path here to returning the business to growth with the product portfolio they're unveiling this year. And that possibility is being discounted. This stock is being priced for another year of contracting sales. And I think it's too early in February to consider that a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, it is pretty shocking that the stock fell so big when the same day that FSD is rolling out in China. I don't know if people are recognizing how big of a deal that is. Because of that whole thing that people were saying that the Chinese government was going to kick out Tesla, and they're using it as a bargaining chip. And then, well, now it looks like that they approved it. So again, it's just a first step. Not saying that it's solved or anything like that, but it kind of washes away this idea that China's not going to be good to Tesla. Let's start with you, Rocco.
Sorry, let me make one last point. When you look at that roadmap and you see them delivering every item on schedule, and they say they're going to launch a rideshare service this year, believe them.
It's looking good. Yeah. In September, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 things they said they were going to do in September. They did them all, everything. And then in October, unpark park reverse version 13 with 6 time improved miles between interventions. They did that. And then now FD in China in first quarter. So they were reiterating that. So next thing we're hoping, this is an interesting thing. FSD in Europe is supposed to be first quarter. So January, February, March, we got 1 month. That would be really cool if that actually did.
Lars mentioned something coming in the next few months. I think it's ready from a
Yeah.
tech perspective. It's just going to be up to the regulators.
It was the words he said, and yeah, it's debatable what he meant. Rocco?
Thanks for having me up. You think the new or upcoming FSD models coming out over time will grow Tesla stock or not as much effect to it?
Well, I think what will grow Tesla stock is people just falling in love with the product and not having to drive. When I'm in the car and I can just push the button and it takes me where I want to go smoothly and comfortably, and I don't have to worry about it, I just go, man, I love this thing. And that eventually is going to translate to earnings. We're not really seeing it in this quarter, but you just listen to people. You talk to people who use FSD in the US and China. I think it's clear that this is going to lead to higher auto sales. It's going to lead to higher customer retention. And it's going to create an additional revenue stream of recurring revenue from FSD subscriptions and sales.
I do not think the stock's going to react. By the way, I'm kind of an outlier. I also don't think necessarily the stock will react in June when they launch it, because it's going to be small pilots. It's going to have to be big moves, probably in the next year before robotaxi is going to move the stock. I think robots will move the stock before that. But FSD is so good now. I've not had an intervention over 3 weeks after I got my front camera cleaned by Tesla Service, and my wife is blown away now. Of course, especially when I do Smart Summit every time we get out of the restaurant, and yet nobody knows. And she just asks the question, "Why don't people know that this car can do this?" Yeah, no matter how many videos Omar does, we're living in a small bubble, and so I think it will take some sort of it has to go right beyond the societal narrative before that. And I don't think that the launches in June is going to actually do that. Personally, I know a lot of people do. That's the case.
I'll tell you something, Herbert. There's a gigantic market amongst us old farts. And you guys are all young. I'm 79 in a couple of days. I'll be in my 80s shortly, and a lot of our friends are in their 80s, and they struggle. I have to go and pick up many of our friends to take them to dinner because they won't drive at night. My wife's like that. She won't drive at night. Now she drives freely at night because she discovered, she watched me using FSC. She said, I want you to teach me how to do this because that will make a difference in my life. I said, I don't have to teach you. All I have to teach you is to push the button. So about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, actually before I left, I went to, so about 2 weeks ago, she took over the car at night and that's it. She's off and away. I can't see her for dust night after night. So what I'm telling you is there's a gigantic market amongst old farts, and there are a lot of them around. I mean, we're a huge, huge population, and we have money. And so this is, I think this is the market we should go for. Anyway, just an aside.
Yeah. Yoda? I was going to ask this. Oh, Yoda, are you there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what's quite interesting now with FSD in China is that the Chinese automakers could actually be the first companies to license FSD. They move much faster. There's many of them. And I think the shocking fact to them is, where are the operators? these sort of systems, I think in China, they kind of require these people that sit, behind computers and simulations to provide assistance. But I don't think Tesla is setting up anything like that in China. So yeah, I think the Fords, the GMs, if they don't want a Chinese company to be the first to license FSD American technology, they should probably make a move now.
That's a big, big, good point because now that FSC is approved in China, it's a bloodbath. It's like a red ocean there. They're all trying to one up each other. Like, oh, my car has a fridge in the back. My car all those seats can swivel. They're all trying to add extra technology to show they're better. So there's so many of them that a few of them will jump and say, hey, let's license you now so that we can get in front. I would not be surprised if this announcement comes sooner than later. And again, I've been saying, though, I think it's up to Tesla. Tesla's the one choosing. I have no doubt they've got lots of companies already approaching them. They're trying to pick and choose which one is appropriate, large enough, and so forth. So, Randy was here. Omar, I want to ask you this question. Waymo is already existing. They have 700, maybe 1,000 cars, and they're charging about the same, or if not even higher than Uber and Lyft. When Tesla comes out, Randy actually thinks that they're going to charge the same amount as Uber, because they don't have enough cars. They're going to have to keep the demand. They don't want to have too many people order them. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're going to charge lower than these guys. Maybe not charge. They're not going to do 25 cents or 50 cents a mile, but there'll certainly be, $1, $1.50, but it's going to be lower than $2. What's your take on that?
Well, I don't know what they're going to price it at. I would think maybe the same as Uber and Lyft to start. You can kind of bring it down over time. It is just going to be a better service. It's going to be a better drive. It's going to be a better car. You're going to have privacy. The market will probably still take up the service strongly, even at the same price as Uber and Lyft. Of course, if they want to make a splash, you can undercut Uber and Lyft pricing and then gather more customers. But you may undermine your pricing long term if you're too aggressive.
Omar, what's the price for the Waymo?
In urban areas, Waymo can charge as much as $10 a mile with a formula that incorporates both time and mileage.
Yeah. Okay. I'll ask one more question, then we can change the topic. Overly optimistic future?
Hey, Omar, I just had a question about something that Lars talked about on the Ride the Lightning podcast. He said, they're going to be kind of implementing the inductive charging, wireless charging for the cybercabs, obviously, because it doesn't have an ACS port. But how do you think it made it sound like they can just adapt that with the current supercharging network? How do you think that all is going to be planned out?
Well, they're just simply going to put wireless charging pads at existing supercharger stations. So he said it won't be all of them, but the Cybercab will be able to go to a supercharger, drive over the pad, charge itself, and go. And other EVs are going to be supporting wireless charging. It's going to be all across the lineup. Really, wireless charging is the future of charging. What this is going to let you do in a Cybercab is, let's say I wanted to drive from Los Angeles to San Francisco. I could fall asleep in the car could drive, pull off the highway, go to the supercharger, park over the charger, recharge, and get back on the road and take me to my destination without me ever having to wake up. So this is obviously something gas cars can't do. It's something that you can do with electric. It's become an industry standard. So not only Tesla, but other EVs will start getting wireless charging. But it's been a chicken and the egg problem. Nobody wants to put the wireless charging pad on the EVs and add extra cost because there's no wireless chargers to use, so it would be pointless. And nobody wants to build wireless chargers because there's no EVs that support it. Now with Tesla, they own the charging network and the cars. They're going to end this. They're going to make it a standard. And honestly, I think it'll be a big step forward for EV usability. This is really the future, wireless charging.
You know, when I heard that interview with Ride the Lightning and Lars Morvey, and talking about the wireless charging, what I heard him say was it's only going to be a handful at the beginning, and it's what Omar's saying, like the longer trips, which is surprising, right? It's not like just the shorter, like within a city. And which that to me means that in the city they probably have their own service centers, their own, some sort of location that the cabs will go back to at nighttime and they'll charge there. But the superchargers it's made, Lars made it sound like it's going to be a handful only, and it'll be at these locations that are like more city to city. But
yeah, I just had a little question on top of that. Is it? I don't know technically if it's possible for like our AI4 cars, like our Model 3s, Model Ys, to be retrofitted, or if they're going to be capable of inductive charging. Is that something do you think Tesla's thinking about, or you think they're just going to kind of go right in with it with Cybercab?
And a retrofit is theoretically possible, but it would be complicated enough that I'm going to guess they're not going to do it. Now, the Cybertruck supposedly does have a port to add in a wireless charging pad. It may be available for that. I think, and it was interesting in the podcast, Lars said we're about to introduce this very soon. So I was like, oh, okay. So we may be seeing more of this in the coming months. If they made a wireless charger for sale for my Cybertruck or Model 3, I'd definitely buy it. But I think probably the Cybercab and maybe the new, more affordable models. They've talked about those new models sharing some of the underpinnings of the Cybercab. Maybe that would mean that you could also have wireless charging on that. I imagine that vehicle would need to have a charge port, but we could see them introduce wireless charging soon. It'll probably start with some of the newer vehicles where they're designing it from a clean sheet approach. My understanding from talking to engineers is to install a wireless charging pad, it has to get into the battery intake, which is kind of buried in the 3Y. So it's not that easy to get to. Eventually, of course, I think all the cars will be redesigned to have a wireless charging pad, but that's not necessarily going to happen overnight.
yeah, I highly doubt that the more affordable vehicles will have wireless charging. This is specifically for robo-taxi designed vehicles. And it'll go out slow. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.